Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our next session of the Library Lunch and Learn. This one is exciting. It's a fun one today through the lens of photography and art books. This is the session that will celebrate the books that, let's face it, everybody loves to look at and browse through. And the reason that if somebody ever suggests that we should go entirely to ebooks, which I don't think anybody would, especially not on this call, but I think once people look through a beautiful photography or art book or a coffee table book, then people know that there is a total need and for a beautiful printed book. So today we are so excited to talk to you about books for your collections that celebrate these beautiful topics and the beautiful images that make up a lot of history and a lot of what we talk about in culture. So we're so happy that you're with us again today. We thank you for coming. We hope you are enjoying your summer so far. And don't forget, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be in September, and it's going to be a business and management one. So this one is going to be a visual experience, wonderful experience for you all, and we're very happy that you're back. And Miriam is here also, and she's going to introduce our first panelist.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Library Lunch and Learn. It's my pleasure to introduce our first distinguished guest from the Library of Congress, reference librarian Melissa Lindberg. In the Prints and Photographs division, Melissa works primarily with collection material that relates to American social history, covering a broad cross-section of visual formats and periods. She's a regular contributor to Picture This blog and the author of numerous subject guides, including Native American History and Culture, Finding Pictures, and Great Migration, Finding Pictures. Melissa holds graduate degrees in history and library science from the University of Maryland, and an undergraduate degree in history and psychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so glad to be here today. I think we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So I'm looking forward to providing everyone a brief introduction to the Prints and Photographs division of the Library of Congress where I work. As Miriam pointed out, I'm a reference librarian in the division, and I've been there for 4 years. Before that, I did archival processing work at a number of different institutions before transitioning to public services work. And I'm one of 7 reference librarians in our division, including the head of our reading room. And each of us has an area of concentration. As Miriam noted, mine is social history, which is very broad, but some of my other colleagues do military history, history of sports, work with design records and architectural drawings. So there's quite a range of visual materials that we work with. Today, I'll provide a broad overview of what we collect in the division and show some sample images from the collections. And then I'll also provide some very basic information about searching the collections online, primarily for digitized images that are freely downloadable from offsite. Can we move to the next slide, please? By way of introduction to the Prints and Photographs division, here is a photo of the Library of Congress Capitol Hill campus. The Prints and Photographs reading room is located in the Madison building, just where you see that red arrow pointing on the slide. And the image at bottom right shows our reading room. We're very excited to say that our reading room has very recently reopened. And although we've recently rearranged some furniture to facilitate social distancing, this pre-pandemic photo still gives a pretty accurate sense of the space. Our division collects a number of formats, including photographs, historical prints, posters, cartoons, documentary drawings, fine prints, and architectural and engineering designs. While international in scope, the collections are particularly strong in materials documenting the history of the United States and the lives and interests of Americans. Much of the collection dates from the 19th and 20th centuries, but we certainly have some earlier materials, and we do continue to collect contemporary images in addition to historical materials. And our collection just within our division currently totals about 16 million images. As an aside, while the Prints and Photographs division is the primary source for visual materials at the Library of Congress, there are many other divisions of the library that also have visual content, including the American Folklife Center, the Rare Book and Special Collections division, the Geography and Map division, the Manuscript division, and more, even our general collections that have published books. Next slide, please. On this and the next slide, I'll show some examples of photographs from the collections. Photos make up the vast majority of the collection, over 90%. The image at top right may be familiar to you. It's a photograph of Florence Owens Thompson, also known as Migrant Mother, taken by Dorothy Lang in 1936 as part of the Farm Security Administration and Office of War Information project to document life in the United States during the late 1930s and early 1940s. Lang photographed Thompson, a Cherokee woman, with some of her children as they waited for Thompson's partner to return with parts to fix their car. Lang was apparently in a rush and didn't record accurate caption information. So her caption, which read, "Destitute pea pickers in California, a 32-year-old mother of 7 children," wasn't completely accurate, as Thompson and her family were actually just passing through the area. Lang, the photographer, who was known for her careful record keeping, reported decades later that Thompson had just sold the tires from her car to buy food. One of Thompson's sons later said that was inaccurate, stating, quote, "I don't believe that Dorothy Lang was lying. I just think she had one story mixed up with another, or she was borrowing to fill in what she didn't have," end quote. This image and its caption provide a good example of why it's not always a good idea to take historical captions at face value, and how even the most meticulous record keepers can make mistakes. The top left photograph here was taken by George Barker in 1886 and shows an image of a steamboat approaching a dock in Silver Springs, Florida. Barker is best known for his photographs of Niagara Falls, but he took quite a few photos in Florida when it was still relatively difficult to travel, particularly with all of his camera equipment. The bottom image is an example of a panoramic photo in our collections, of which we have a number. This one's by Frank Schluter of Goose Creek Oil Field in Texas. Next slide, please. So the image at left is a self-portrait by photographer Robert Cornelius from 1839 and is believed to be the earliest extant American portrait photo. We learned from curator Carol Johnson that Louis Daguerre had presented his invention of a photographic method to the French Academy in 1839. Later that year, Robert Cornelius, who was working outside to take advantage of the light, made this head and shoulders self-portrait using a box fitted with a lens from an opera glass. In the portrait, Cornelius stands slightly off-center with his hair askew in the yard behind his family's lamp and chandelier store, peering uncertainly into the camera. Early daguerreotypes required a long exposure time ranging from 3 to 15 minutes, making the process fairly impractical for portraiture. We also have some photographs that show how far some photographers were willing to go for a good shot, such as the middle photograph on display here, which shows a photographer precariously suspended above the Grand Canyon in a 1908 photo. And then on the right, you see an image taken by photographer Carol M. Highsmith in 2015. She captioned the photograph, "Members of the Native American Woman Warriors, a Pueblo, Colorado-based association of active and retired American Indians in U.S. military service at a Colorado Springs Native American intertribal powwow and festival in that central Colorado city." Next slide, please. So we also have a large collection of popular and fine art prints in the collection. The lithograph at left celebrates industrialization and 20th century transportation technology, and it was produced in 1910. We categorize this kind of print as a historical print or popular graphic art print, as most of these were mass produced. The Library of Congress acquired most of its popular graphic art prints through the copyright registration and deposit process, through which copyright registrants were required to submit 2 copies of their work to the Library of Congress. The woodcut at right is by Mutawaga Hiroshige, one of the most famous ukiyo-e artists, and that was a genre of art popular in Japan from around the 17th through the 19th centuries. And this particular print shows a bird's eye view of Amano Hashidate, a long peninsula extending to Miyazu Bay. Next slide, please. Here you see more examples of prints from the collection. On the left is a print by Mexican printmaker Jose Guadalupe Posada, who popularized the calavera, or skeleton figure, in Mexican print culture. Often a calavera image is accompanied by a textual ballad, as you see here. This particular image represents a variety of techniques, including relief etching and relief cut, with text and letterpress. And then on the right, you can see a soft ground etching and aquatint print by Mary Cassatt of Nurse and Baby Bill. Next slide, please. So we also have a number of posters in the collection. We have a very large collection that includes travel posters, movie posters, propaganda posters, and more from the United States and from many other countries. We've digitized many of our WPA posters, World War I posters, circus posters, as well as propaganda posters from our Yanker collection. On the left, you can see an example of a poster with Art Nouveau aspects showing a seated woman holding a palette and paintbrushes. It was designed by Louis Reed, a prominent 19th century poster artist. In the middle, you can see an example of a WPA poster made to advertise the Grand Canyon. Our WPA poster collection is very popular and has been fully digitized. These scans are freely downloadable through our online catalog, and I'll tell you more about that later. The poster on the right is an advertisement for TWA Airlines, specifically for visiting New York City. Next slide, please. We also have drawings in the collection, including the two that you see here. The drawing at left is part of a collection of charts compiled to exhibit at the 1900 Paris Exposition. The charts, created by an Atlanta University-based team led by W.B. Du Bois, visually communicate aspects of the African American experience over time, some of them looking at the United States as a whole and some looking at the state of Georgia as a case study. Du Bois was creative in his data visualization techniques. At the time, he was a professor of sociology at Atlanta University, and he was committed to combating racism with empirical evidence of the economic, social, and cultural conditions of African Americans post-slavery. He believed that a clear revelation of the facts of African American life and culture would challenge the ideas of biological race science that were influential at the time, which proposed that Black people were inherently inferior to white people. On the right is a drawing by suffragist and cartoonist Nina Allender, who made this image for publication in the suffragist newspaper in 1917, a few years before the 19th Amendment, which allowed women's suffrage before the 19th Amendment was ratified by the states. And the image shows Uncle Sam holding a pennant with his right hand, and it reads, "Democracy for the world," while he simultaneously is holding back a woman who's holding up a sign of her own that reads, "Democracy begins at home." Next slide, please. There are also documentary drawings in the collections, including a number made during the Civil War. The Library of Congress has strong coverage of the US Civil War, both in photographs and other formats. This drawing of General Custer, his staff, and prisoners by Alfred R. Woad is one such example, and we have a number of drawings by Woad in the collection that have been digitized. Next slide, please. We also have architecture, design, and engineering drawings in the collection. On the left is a drawing of ironwork for the dome of the Library of Congress Jefferson Building from 1892. On the right is a drawing from a historic American building survey from 1972 that shows some views of Zuni Pueblo. The Historic American Building Survey is a large project administered by the National Park Service, and the Library of Congress provides researchers access to the materials that are compiled for these surveys, and they often include architectural drawings, photos, as well as textual documentation. Next slide, please. The architecture collections also include Maya Lin's competition drawings for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. At left, you can see a copy of one of the boards that she submitted showing and explaining aspects of her winning design. Lin proposed a black granite wall shaped like a V. The wall would include inscriptions of the names of African American service members, who had been killed or were missing. The architect hoped that these names, seemingly infinite in number, would convey the sense of overwhelming numbers while unifying these individuals into a whole. Maya Lin's plan is one of 1,421 design competition submissions documented in the Library of Congress as part of the papers of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. On the right is a drawing for an addition to a house in Washington, D.C., made by architect George N. Ray. And that's just to show you that we have a lot of sort of just everyday buildings represented in the collections. Next slide, please. The last specific images I want to show you from the collections are these architectural photographs. I mentioned that the vast majority of the collection consists of photos, and these include architectural photographs. Balthazar Korab, who took the photo of the main terminal at Dulles International Airport in 1958 on the left, was one of the most significant architectural photographers in the United States during the second half of the 20th century. On the right is a photograph by Jack Boucher of the Bradbury Building in Los Angeles. Boucher was a longtime photographer for the Historic American Building Survey that I just discussed a couple slides ago. So now at this point, we've gone through all of the specific samples from the collection, and we'll move on to talking about how you can learn more about the collections and access some digital content through our online catalog. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the homepage for the Prints and Photographs Reading Room. I want to show you this page because it includes a lot of helpful links. I've highlighted the link to search Prints and Photographs material through the Prints and Photographs online catalog at top left, as well as our information for researchers page and rights and restrictions information pages, and also our Ask a Librarian, a link to our Ask a Librarian form, which you should feel free to use anytime you have any questions about pictures in our collections. I want to stress that there's a lot of other really good information on this page as well. The information for researchers page includes more about our service from a distance policies, the collection guides, finding aids, lists of images, resource lists, and blog all can help you discover relevant images and collections by topic. Next slide, please. So I mentioned our Ask a Librarian form in particular, and just wanted to show you what it looks like. It's pretty friendly and easy to fill out. As I mentioned, our reading room has reopened to the public. So if you wanted to make an appointment to come in, if you're local, for example, you could fill out this form to ask us about making an appointment. However, regardless of whether you plan to come in on site or not, we're ready to answer any questions you might have about our pictorial collections. Some answers will involve waiting, as we still have limited access to some of our collection material, but we are answering many questions, even from a distance and even from home. And we're usually able to respond, even if not with a full answer, within about 5 business days. Next slide, please. So now we come to where I will introduce you to our Prints and Photographs online catalog, and we can move to the next slide. So this is a screenshot of the homepage of the Prints and Photographs online catalog, or what we affectionately call PPOC. And I have to give me one moment, my computer timed out. I can't see the screen, just one moment. So if you could confirm that you can hear me, I can just keep doing the presentation. I just can't see it.
We can hear you, and you're on the Prints and Photographs online catalog page.
Thank you so much. So, and I did just manage to get back. So, given our limited time, I'm just going to focus on basic keyword searching, the online catalog. I'll let you know about a couple of other things too, but I'll just focus on keyword searching because that's the way most people find materials in our collections. I quickly want to point out that PPOC has broad descriptions of about 95% of the collection, but that these descriptions range from very specific item level descriptions to really broad descriptions of unprocessed collections that include thousands of images. And of the approximately 16 million images in the collection, about 1.4 million have been digitized. Next slide, please. So the first tip that I want to provide is that you can add the phrase "no known restrictions" to your search phrase to look for images that have that rights advisory. So no known restrictions means just that. We don't know of any copyright restrictions on the images, and we're very conservative about using that phrase. So, and this is where I need to emphasize that as a public institution, the Library of Congress doesn't own the rights to the materials in our collections, and we can't grant or deny permission to use them, just as we can't advocate for certain materials or publishers or anything to that degree. But no known restrictions is the best that we can say about any given image. Images with the no known restrictions rights advisory display off-site and are freely downloadable. Sometimes you'll encounter a catalog record for materials with a no known restrictions rights statement that are not yet digitized. So obviously you can't download those yet until they're scanned. For all digitized materials, though, regardless of rights status, you will see at least a thumbnail image. Your search results will display by default as a list, as you can see here. And I searched here for drawings by Binold Rice together with the no known restrictions phrase. However, there are other ways to view the search results, which you can see on the next slide. So you can also, in addition to looking at the results in the list view, you can choose at the top right of the slide on that sort of skinny gray bar at the right-hand side, you can click on Gallery. And that view shows thumbnail images as well as just a brief title. And that makes it a little bit easier to scan for specific images in some cases. And then moving to the next slide, you can see that there's a third view that you can use called the grid view. You don't see any titles in the descriptions in the results there, but you can see more of the thumbnail images. So if you're really just looking for visuals, this is a great view to use. Next slide, please. Another way to limit your search results to those that display anywhere is to enter your keywords in the top search bar without the no known restrictions phrase, but then click on that orange box that's highlighted here at left, corresponding to larger image available anywhere. Keep in mind, however, that there are some materials with rights restrictions that display off-site by permission of the rights holder. So while the rights holder has given us permission to display them, they still want permission for people to use the images and publications or otherwise distribute them. So next slide, please. So in addition to the search box, you can also explore by clicking on the links about specific collections below. We call these buckets. There's a list of dozens on the main page that and you can also select View All with Description. And you can see that at the top of that highlighted area in red. And that'll show you a list with a brief description of each of those collections. And that view also tells you how much of the collection is digitized and gives a date range for the material. It can be a good way to zero in on relevant materials before you even begin with a keyword search. Next slide, please. A favorite bucket of mine is the African American photographs assembled for the 1900 Paris Exposition, which were largely compiled by W.E.B. Du Bois, and also include those stunning charts aiming to show the progress of Black communities in the US over time. I showed you an example earlier of one of those charts. You can also see there's a search bar here, so you can search just within the collection this way. On the left, you have a menu of subpages about the collection, and below that, you have a series of browse lists specific to that collection. So if you want to search for creator names or subjects or formats within the collection, you can do that. We also have a number of other buckets, including for collections represented by some of the images that I showed earlier. So for example, we have Farm Security Administration, Office of War Information, black and white photograph bucket that includes the Dorothea Lange migrant mother image. We have a bucket for our WPA posters, for our popular graphic art prints, and for several related fine art prints, collections of fine art prints. And we also have one for the Historic American Building Survey materials, Civil War materials, and much more. So that's just to give you this was just a brief introduction to our collections. I'm sure you all probably have more questions. And at this point, I'm going to wrap up my portion of the presentation. And I think, Miriam, you wanted to ask me a question, and if other questions arose, I'm happy to field any questions.
Thank you so much, Melissa. We do have just one question, if you don't mind. Is there a recent acquisition that you're very excited about?
Well, one fairly recent accession of ours was sort of a continuation of an existing collection, which is the National Women's Party records, which are shared. Most of that collection is in the manuscript division at the Library of Congress. So this is kind of an example of how things can be shared across divisions at the library. And last year was the centennial celebration of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. I'm not sure how the timing worked out, but it did work out well that we got this new accession of drawings by Nina Allender. I showed you an example earlier of an image by Nina Allender, but she was an amazing artist, active suffragist. And so we're very excited that we now have 167 of her drawings newly added to the collection.
Fantastic. Melissa Lindberg, reference librarian from the Prints and Photographs Division of the Library of Congress. I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. That was really that was really helpful and interesting. And I hope all of you will learn something and will go to the prints and photographs reading room. And is it called PPOC? Is that what you said? What an
The
amazing,
catalog is.
the
Yes.
catalog.
Yes, PPOC is the catalog. Yep.
Thank you. What an amazing collection. That was really, it's also such a great reminder that we learn so much by visual learning. So that was really great. Thank you for that. It was like I feel like I was back in one of my college art classes, which was fun, which was a long time ago. Thank you so much, Melissa. We really enjoyed having you today. And just so everybody knows, we will be sending the PDF of Melissa's presentation out today after the in our wrap-up report. So you'll have all of these resources available without having to scribble anything down on a piece of paper right now. So thank you, Melissa. And now we are going to bring on our next guest, Lavelle Levette. And just give me 1 second to change the PowerPoint here. Let's see, sorry, it always takes us a minute to do this. And Lavelle, if you want to put your camera on and your unmute yourself, that would be great. Up there you are. Hello. All right, let me just bring up your PowerPoint now. That was such a visual pleasure to see. And our next presentation will be even more visually pleasing, I think. This is going to be a really fun conversation that we're about to have with Lavelle Levette. Hi, Lavelle, how are you? Let me just make sure you're unmuted. Okay, hold on.
I thought I was.
Oh, now you are. Yeah. Hi, how are you? So let me just introduce Lavelle, and then we're going to get into a really wonderful presentation about Lavelle's book, Ebony Covering Black America. Lavelle Levette is a best-selling author, educator, producer, social entrepreneur, and the president and publisher of One Street Books and Ebony Magazine's imprint, Ebony Publishing. She's a master's degree. She's a former school district administrator, speechwriter, marketing executive, and she also served as a special advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Rod Page, from 2001 to 2005. Beyond her work in community engagement, nonprofit, and the education spheres with her best-selling series, The Adventures of Roopster Roo, Levette is also the co-founder of Every Child an Author, class by class, school by school. ECAA is on a mission, which I love this mission, to make every child in America a published author, one grade level at a time. That is so fun. You know, what do you do in your spare time? Thank you so much for being here today. We are so privileged to work with Rizzoli Publishing, who has this beautiful new book out, Ebony Covering Black America. We are so happy to talk to you about it today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And what do I do in my spare time? I skateboard.
Skateboard. I was not expecting you to say that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to start off by something that comment that I read, that you said that Ebony, which I loved, Ebony magazine was the social media for Black America before Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which I loved. And I wonder if you could just, before we get into our other questions, if you could just kind of explain a little bit what you meant by that.
Yes, I mean, Ebony, for me growing up, and also for my mother growing up, and even her mother, it was where we got our information. Not just entertainment, but things that were happening in business, things that were happening in the church. Ebony, like Mr. Johnson set out to do, is show African Americans that we are multifaceted. There's a lot of positive things, or a lot of contributions that we were making that mainstream America was not talking about. And so Mr. Johnson set out to make Ebony magazine that place that we can see ourselves in a multitude of ways. And so as a little girl growing up, You know, we waited for the magazine. We loved looking at the pictures and reading the stories as I got older. And the same thing, my mom told me all sorts of interesting stories about them not being able to afford the magazine, and she and her friends going over to one of her friends' homes that could afford the magazine, and they would gather around and read and tear out some of the photos and put it on their walls, and get in trouble for that, because that magazine is something that you just didn't toss away once you received it. It's you would go into most African American homes and you would see tons of Ebony magazines on their coffee table. So Ebony is family. It's always been, you know, family for us and family for millions of people across the world.
And I think that's a perfect description, especially when you see, when all of you see the different images of some of the covers that we pulled just for this presentation, the timeline that it covers, moments in time, which is why I've always been such a huge magazine fan. I just love that you pick up a magazine at that given moment in time and what is important. And I started off in magazines actually in my career, and I just always loved the holding and the turning of the pages. And Lavelle is going to talk to you about something that she just informed Miriam and I of right before this started, which we found fascinating. If you want to talk about the first couple of slides first.
Right, of course, Ebony was right there covering the historical 60s, the March on Washington, which in this book, actually, this is a book of covers, 75 years worth of covers, but there's one spread in the book that we decided to publish the entire spread as it appeared in the magazine, and which it was titled "The Biggest Protest March Ever." And so there are pictures that Ebony took, the way they photographed that march is a lot of the photos aren't widely known. And so there's a lot of intimate moments that Ebony was able to cover that we thought it was so important to put that full spread in the magazine. And then I was just honored to be able to talk to Ambassador Young, because he was actually there. And so there's a quote that he gave me and allowed us to put in the middle of that spread. And so that was a major highlight in putting this book together and having a chance to spend some time and talk with him about that. So the book is, I say we divided it into 5 sections. It's we cover ebony men, ebony women, ebony music, ebony love and family. I think I'm missing one, and social justice, civil rights, social justice. And so we were able to curate the covers. And when you get into that section, you'll see an introduction by some notables. For instance, social justice, Common did the introduction to that section. Ebony Men, Sean Combs, P. Diddy did the introduction to that. Ebony Music, Sierra did the introduction to Ebony Music. Ebony Women, Kamara Lee Simmons did the introduction to Ebony Women, and Love and Family, Dwayne Wade and Gab Union did that introduction. And so, and also Venus Williams did the afterwards for it. And sprinkled throughout these amazing covers, we were able to get quotes from various people from various walks of life, whether they're famous and not so famous, gave us quotes on different aspects of different covers within this book. So it was just a glorious experience putting it together.
I'm sure it was. What a fascinating group of people to work with. Just one of them would be fascinating, but to work with all of them at once would be amazing. I just wanted to point out that we learned this right before this started, that the vet was telling us that before at some point, Dr. Martin Luther King did an advice column for Ebony, which I found fascinating, and that it's kind of reminded me of like what's her, I can't remember, what's the famous person that everyone would Dear Abby.
Abby, yes, Dear Abby.
Like, one is about, we're about to have our sixth baby and we're bursting at the seams, and it's just, one is like about jealousy of siblings. And can you talk a little bit about this little unknown piece of history?
Yeah, and I was asked, I'm often asked when I'm talking about this book, what surprised you? What were some of the gems that you found? And this was one of them. I prior to engaging in this endeavor, I had no idea that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King actually wrote an advice column for over a year. I think it's a year and a half, a monthly advice column in Ebony magazine. The only column that he's advice column that he's written, and Ebony captured that. And it wasn't all about the struggle and the things that were happening in the 60s. People actually wrote for advice, marriage, family, kid advice, career advice, and then of course sprinkled throughout things that were happening at that time that had to do with the civil rights movement and things of that nature. But imagine you sending in your questions and having them, Martin Luther King Jr. actually, respond and answer and give you advice. So that was most surprising, but just very rewarding to sift through the archives and be able to read advice. And a lot of the things I think that he said apply to today. So I just thought that was brilliant. It was a treasure to find that. And we hope to do some more things with that, within the magazine and some other things as we are starting to publish books in the fiction and nonfiction space. So that is definitely something that we plan to get out into the masses and share that.
Yeah, I think to be able to give practical advice, daily advice from Dr. Martin Luther King, I mean, unbelievable. That is such a gem, and I'm sure that was an amazing discovery.
Yes.
And as I go through the slides, if you have anything specific to say about any of them, just stop and jump in. But we really wanted to talk mostly about the project in general rather than every cover, but the covers are unbelievable.
Yeah, the contrast. I was going to say that the contrast between the early covers, so bright and vibrant, almost look like paintings. The covers from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and you can see the evolution of graphic and technology and how the magazine changed throughout the years. So I thought that was quite interesting. But when you look at, and also at the end of the book, we have every cover, 75 years worth of covers are in the index of this book. And so no cover was left out. But as we put together the sections, it was a daunting task to look at, okay, well, what covers will we put in the music section? What are we going to put in Love and Family? And I didn't want this to be a book about sort of like what I liked or what appealed to me. And so that's how we came about our curation process. When I started reaching out to teachers, engineers, famous musicians, famous celebrities, actors, and we sent out, a Dropbox with all of the covers, and I asked friends and colleagues to sift through, and any cover that stood out to you, if you would be so kind to send a quote about it or send just a little clip about that. And so that's how our process of selecting the covers for each section came about, basically with input from people from various walks of life. And it was just so refreshing, all of the phone calls and the Zoom meetings with various people, we set out just to talk about, hey, the quote that you sent me, can you elaborate a little bit more? And then we get into hours of conversations about what Ebony meant to them and just how important this magazine was and still is.
I'm sure it was probably fascinating to see that the different appeal of each cover to different people, and something that was like really significant to one person was maybe not as significant. Like, I'm sure that was really one of the nicest processes to discover during this, to see what jumped out at people.
Yeah, it was very fascinating to see that, because things that a lot of us may have skipped over. What was interesting is Dorothy, that's her first name, a 14-year-old out of Chicago. She's at age 14, she's already graduated from college, has her master's degree. She's based in Chicago. Her family, her grandmother and her mother have a long history with Ebony. And her quote appears in the book. I just found it quite interesting, quite refreshing, her take on Ebony and what it meant to her. She's 14. Well, I guess this year she'll be 15, but just her take on it as well. And so getting that multi-generational input into this book was just amazing.
That is amazing. Wow. I love that. I love when something spans such a long period of time. It just covers life. And I think that it's great to see, you're right, it's great to see a younger generation coming to it as well. Before we talk about the historical significance that the last 75 years have had, could you maybe just give us a little bit of information about the founder of the magazine and how how it's going to start off as a really small production, and then how, just a little bit about what happened to it over the years.
So Mr. Johnson and his wife Eunice founded Ebony Magazine, and the genesis of it was really quite simple. He looked at Life magazine, and he wanted a magazine sort of in the vein of Life magazine to reflect Black America. And that's what he set out to do. And I think, a lot of his subscription base, as I understand it, went through the churches. He was able to, sell subscriptions and build up his subscription base by going through churches and appealing to families, and that's how the magazine was able to grow. His base was the the religious sector, and for so many years, Ebony actually did a top minister edition where Ebony highlighted ministers from across the country. Some of our top growing churches and ministers across the country, because that's really, even though Ebony is not a religious magazine, I know that Mr. Johnson felt that he owed a lot to that sector of the community that really supported him in the beginning and continued to support him. So, Ebony was styled off of Life magazine, and Mr. Johnson went on to create a publishing division. That is the division that I head up today. Archives of books in the young adult kids area, as well as adult nonfiction. Mr. Lerone Bennett Jr., who was the editor-in-chief of the magazine, authored a number of books under the Ebony imprint. A notable one, Beyond the Mayflower. So we are in talks with his family, and we're looking at publishing second, third editions of some of his books and creating a collection around that. And so the founder of Ebony Magazine not only brought this magazine to the populace, but he also created other businesses that sprung from that, being a publishing company, a cosmetics company, think the cosmetics was a fashion fair. Ebony was also known for its traveling fashion fair, the makeup, but also the models. So he was quite the entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's so timeless. I'm looking at these two covers and they're just so timeless. They're just beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and we put them in the book side by side. That's how it appears in the book.
Yeah,
Debbie Allen. Yeah. Well, the slide before that was Debbie Allen.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that Debbie Allen cover is like popping out at me the most, I think. I know it's like not the most appropriate question, but did you have a favorite or a couple of favorite covers that meant the most to you or even maybe before you started the book, it was one thing, but then after you did a little bit of the research, like something else kind of bubbled to the top because of what the story is behind it or something like that?
Right. God, I have so many favorite covers. I don't, and I hate to say that this one was my favorite or this one, but I have favorites in all categories for various reasons. You know, the Debbie Allen is, I mean, it just pops. When I look at it, it just puts a smile on my face. It's happy, it's joyous. Um, um, the great musician, Louis Armstrong, his cover, I don't think we have it in the slide, but what really caught my attention was a lot of the, I didn't say the bylines, but a lot of the headlines of the captions, particularly in the early 50s and the 60s. What was inside, I mean, the magazine was the highlight, but the sidebars of what they actually covered in the 40s and the 50s, I found that quite interesting. But the Louis Armstrong cover, Grace Jones cover was fire. I think that was maybe in the late 60s or 70s. So a lot of the entertainment covers, because of course, modern age, you know, I grew up with a lot of these people, and at this stage in my life career, I've had opportunity to meet a number of them. So those covers were very special to me. So I can't say just one. It's just a
Yeah,
number of things that were just.
And what about your collaborators? Did you find that some of them were discovering things about the magazine that they didn't know, that they didn't realize was out there? Like, when they were looking through the archives, were they just as surprised as you were, or
Yeah, I think a lot of people in a particular, I don't know what generation we call this, Gen Xers. It was a discovery for a lot of them, because some of them, and I had a conversation with a very notable person, and they were aware of the entertainment aspect of it, but the hard-hitting topics around social justice and civil rights that Ebony covered um, was enlightening to them and to a number of people that I spoke with. When you think of lifestyle, you think of entertainment and light affair, but Ebony went deep. I mean, like I said, Ebony was our Facebook, our Instagram, social media. We got a lot of our information from Ebony, because mainstream media was not covering a lot of things that was of interest to Black Americans. And Ebony was there and one of the first to do it. So I found that a lot of people discovered Martin Luther King Jr. and that advice column. That blew a lot of people away. So that was a big deal. It's still a big deal.
yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think there's a difference? This is just more of a general question, but also if you could put it in the context of Ebony, do you think there's a different relationship now that people have with magazines than they used to have because of social media, or do you think that it's still just as essential for magazines to stay current?
Well, I believe that magazines should stay current, and although adopting modern technology, but in a sense still having that that magazine that you could touch and feel, and even tear out important pages to you put on your wall still. I think that's important for kids and young people to have that
It's a
opportunity.
missed opportunity to not do that.
Yeah, yeah, that tactileness of it all. But you know, the magazine business is, you know, there are a lot of challenges. You know, right now, America, the world, it's instant. And so I know on the magazine side of it, although that is, the magazine is headed by Eden Bridgman, Michelle Gee, and Maricel. You know, they are, from a digital standpoint, it's a daily. They're constantly curating, at the minute, at the moment, issues that are happening in the world. And so keeping up with that is different than when you putting together a monthly magazine, how you're curating that, and how you're curating a digital magazine plus doing, you know, some hardcover editions. So answer your question, it's I know it's a challenge, but I know that Ebony is committed to keeping the tradition of Ebony and what it was founded on, keeping that going. And so even though there are different iterations of it, meaning that back in the day when it started, there was not a digital copy of Ebony, but now there's a digital Ebony. You can go to ebony.com and get up to the moment, up to the minute information on what's happening in Black America. But there will also be hardcovers. We are also committed to discovering new voices and amplifying old and new voices through books. So, you know, publishing fiction, nonfiction, adult publishing, children's YA books is another commitment that Ebony as a brand has, to make sure that we continue to cover Black America in all facets of all that we do.
I love that. It's funny that you said that, because I think I mentioned earlier that I started out in magazine publishing and then moved over to book publishing. And one of the things about magazine publishing that I used to think before I went to book publishing was how fast paced it was, and how every month you had to put another issue out, put another issue out. And I thought that was a little manic. So when I went to books, it was like, oh, this is a book takes like a year to put together. And now to think that the digital editions of the magazine are online, and then they have to be still updated every single day. I think that the magazine itself, this book that we're talking about today, are reminders that it's nice to have a hardcover archive of something that's taken a little bit of extra time to put together. And I know, as librarians that are on the line, I'm sure this is making them very happy to know that you're still committed to this process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you know, this I look at this book and I see it as a connector, and that's exactly what this book has been doing as I travel the country in this pandemic world, as we start to travel. But I say that travel meaning it's a virtual travel. We are connecting generations with this book. I've gotten phone calls and done Skypes and Zooms with parents and children where they're sharing their past through this book, and so, and our history as well. And so it's a conversation starter, but it's a teaching tool for our younger generation. And so we will be embarking on a national tour next year with this book, and doing fireside chats around our past. But we're doing it in a sense that using our past to make a better now. Yes, a better future, but we're living in the now. And how can we take all of this goodness that was done, around the struggle, and how can we build on that? How can we build on it to make a better now? And so that's a task that, I'm tasked with to do with this book. And so, it's an awesome connector.
Yeah, oh, this was really nice. And I agree. And I think you're right. We are living in the now, but we can't forget about where we've all come from and how we've gotten here. And I think I really love this book. I think it's beautiful. I think it's informative, and I'm so proud to be able to work with it. So Lavelle, thank you so much for being here today. If anybody has any questions that they want to put in the chat real quick, let us know. But if not, we are definitely all such a supporter of this project. We thank you for being here, and we will continue to promote this title to our libraries and to our fans. And we got such nice comments in the chat section about how fascinating it is, and so happy that you're here today. And I think all of us will have to go in the archive and look at the advice that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would give, because who else, how could you get better advice?
Right. But we will be putting something out on that, or curating a book or something around that. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and again, look, just to just go through these covers is just amazing. And so we just really are so happy you were with us today. And some people remember these covers. I remember that Temptations cover, somebody said. So I think this is so fun. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And happy traveling. Be careful.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Take care. And we just have one more part of the show that we wanted to, what part of the program we wanted to talk to you about today. And Miriam's just going to talk to you about that.
Sure. And in addition to Ebony, covering Black America, we have a number of new art titles to share, and we've created an Edelweiss collection for you. These include monographs and exhibition catalogs that highlight the work of influential canonical artists, from Vincent van Gogh to Isamu Noguchi, to contemporary artists such as Yayoi Kusama and Toyin Oji Odutula. This fall, there are several essential artist memoirs and biographies to watch for, including Ai Weiwei's widely anticipated autobiography, 1,000 Years of Joys and Sorrows, and Mark Pettijohn's Back to Japan, which chronicles the life and art of a master kimono painter. And finally, we have a number of instructional handbooks, manuals, and reference works to share with your patrons and library users, including Color Demystified, Dynamic Human Anatomy, The Joy of Modern Calligraphy, Drawing Nature, and the Spanish edition of You Are an Artist by Sarah Uris Green, Eres un Artista. So thank you. Hope you get a chance to dip into these e-galleys in the very near future.
Thank you. As a book lover, that was such a fun program. The visual aesthetics of that were so fun. We hope that the resources were helpful to you. We hope that you will check out the beautiful book from the Ebony book. And if you have any questions, you could always email us. The wrap-up will go out. All this information will be in here. And again, a reminder that our next Lunch and Learn program will be in September, and the focus will be management and leadership. And we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you.